Hey everybody. So I have kind of big news. I just got my exam results back for Certified Cicerone exam, and I passed. So I thought I would take just a few minutes to describe my experience studying for the exam and the exam process, in case anybody was interested in also pursuing such things. For those that are not familiar with the Certified Cicerone exam, this is a professional certification that kind of guarantees that you have a good, kind of broad baseline knowledge about the major beer styles, keeping and serving beer, and the brewing process in general. So why as home brewers would we want to go after this type of professional certification? Uh, so for me, it really helped fill in certain knowledge gaps, style knowledge, and actually I came out of this brewing additional styles that I wasn't really interested in brewing before, such as alt beer. Also, you're going to improve your own homebrew quality by study this intensive. You're guaranteed to get multiple things out of this that improve your understanding of off flavors, ingredients, process. As home brewers, especially if you haven't been homebrewing that long, maybe there are better ways you could take care of your serving, your beer lines. I know when I first started, I would just flush my lines with some sanitizer every now and then, and that's really not enough. So, also, I think you're going to increase your own appreciation of beer. There's going to be styles that you're just unfamiliar with. Maybe they're hard to get where you live. But you're going to be forced to go try some new styles and really dig into them and evaluate them. And I think chances are you're going to come out finding new styles and gaining new appreciation that you didn't have before. And overall, this is just for me, this was a really fun learning experience. I had a good time doing it overall. So the exam is pretty intense. This is comprised of a 3-hour written exam, and it covers these areas: keeping and serving, beer styles, beer flavor and evaluation, ingredients and process, and food pairing. Especially for me, the food pairing part was kind of interesting because I'm not a foodie. I'm not really into good food. I like good beer, but good food I'm good with, tacos or burger or whatever. But I actually did better on the food pairing than I thought I would. Kind of the key with the pairing part is you just have to be able to justify your answers based on some amount of objective knowledge that exists about how flavors can kind of complement or clash. Then there's also a 45-minute tasting panel, and this will cover off flavor detection, your ability to discriminate between different styles, and I would definitely be prepared for some tricky style discrimination. This isn't necessarily going to be obvious things like, oh, is it a wit beer or is it a stout? They're going to give you things that are a little closer together than that. Maybe even as close together as being able to determine, is this a British or American porter? So be prepared for stuff that is that tricky. And then a third section on the tasting exam kind of hits on both, where you're told the style of the beer, and then they ask, is there anything wrong with it? And if there is, describe what's wrong with it in essay format. So this can be pretty tricky because it's both a combination of your style knowledge and off flavor detection. you might detect what could be an off flavor in one style, but it might be appropriate for the declared style, and you have to know that and recognize it. Then there's a 3-minute demonstration portion, which is usually something out of the keeping and serving module. Maybe demonstrating the proper way to clean glassware, or cleaning a faucet, or changing a keg, something along those lines. So to prepare for the written, one of the most useful things I found was the Road to Cicerone modules. And these are really nice. So, there'll be a module for each kind of large regional beer style. So British beers, German beers, Belgian, American, etc. And then there's a keeping and serving module. And for each of these modules, when you pass, you get a badge showing that you passed online, and they even send you a little pin that you can put on your favorite jacket if you so choose. But going through all these modules individually and passing each one of them, I think, is a great way to prepare for the exam. And they're fairly comprehensive. In addition to those, I think the draft beer quality manual is pretty much a must-have. That'll help further drive home things that are in the keeping and serving Road to Cicerone module. And then Cicerone, they also on their website sell these sets of flashcards, a card for each beer style. These are pretty handy. I found them pretty handy for studying for the BJCP exam as well. Then Brewmaster's Table is a great book on food pairing. And the Beer Steward's Handbook is kind of covers a lot of areas, keeping and serving, brewing, etc., which kind of helps further congeal information that's also contained in the modules. So tasting exam preparation, for off-flavor training, I took about 4 off-flavor training sessions, maybe a few months apart from each other, to really drive certain off-flavors home in my brain. Everybody has issues with certain ones. For me, GMS is one of the harder ones for me to pick up. I can pick it up, but I'm less sensitive to it than some others. Diacetyl was one that took me some training to begin to pick it up really reliably. So, I wouldn't go through a training session just once. I would repeat it a couple times at least. Ways to find these sessions: homebrew clubs, homebrew supply shops will run these occasionally. So look for those opportunities. Cicerone also sells a kit on their website for single use. The multi-use kits are pretty expensive, so that's kind of where a homebrew club comes in. People can maybe pool their money, buy a kit for like 12 people, and I'll do an off-flavor tasting. Also, if you're in good with some of your local bartenders, especially at actual breweries, if you're lucky, they might have a batch that's a little off, and they might admit that to you. I had that happen personally, where I was, having a beer, and the bartender knew I was studying for my Cicerone exam, and he was like, "Oh, you got to taste this. We had hop creep with this beer, so it's diacetyl," and that was really useful to be able to taste in the wild on a real beer instead of just a spiked beer. And then for the style discrimination, drink beer, but drink it with intention. When you're drinking different beer styles, especially ones you're less familiar with, you have to really be sitting there thinking about it, taking notes, thinking about the flavors you're detecting, openly describing them, coming up with words for them, and that will really help drive home the qualities of that particular style. I think it can be useful to get some similar styles together. So, maybe take a German Pilsner and a Czech Pilsner, put them side by side, and if you have somebody around that can pour those for you, taste them blind and see if you can pick one out from the other. And do that, with a few different styles that are really close together. Say, like, another good example would be maybe a porter versus a stout, or a British porter versus an American porter. These are all good things to practice distinguishing. Let's see. Yeah, and have the BJCP guidelines or the flashcards that I mentioned earlier in front of you while you're tasting styles, so you can review the statistics like color, ABV, IBUs, etc. And then for the fit for service section, like I mentioned earlier, this draws on both your off flavor and your style knowledge. So for instance, let's say that they told you, here is a Flemish red. Is this beer okay? Is it fit for service? Well, you could taste it and say, well, I detect some acetic acid, but that's appropriate for a Flemish red. So it could very well be fit for service and have that flavor, which would be an off flavor and could very well be a flaw, making a different style unfit for service. So you really have to have both your off flavors and your style knowledge dialed in for this section. Then for the demo, this one's tricky. They'll give you something to demo. You have 3 minutes to explain everything you know about it, but you don't know what it is ahead of time. From everything I've read, and in my own personal experience, it was a topic from the keeping and serving module. So really just know the content of that module well. Know the names of your draft system components, cleaning schedules, faucet and coupler components. Just have that stuff memorized. And you'll also want to memorize those components for the written anyway, because they'll probably show up there as well. It's definitely probably the most awkward part of the exam, at least it was for me, and I think it was my lowest score out of the whole exam. Luckily, it's not weighted very heavily, it's 4%, but if you have an otherwise marginal score, that's still enough, of course, to make or break pass-fail. So the exam as a whole, all these sections put together, you need a cumulative score of 80% to pass. And you need 70% minimum on the tasting panel. So you can't pass if you get 95 on the written, but you only score 65 on the tasting. From what I've been able to find looking up online, the pass rate is reputed to be around 40%, maybe a little less. And their recommended study time, even if you are somebody who works in the industry, they say, look, this is probably going to take you at least 6 months. If you don't work in the industry, you're probably looking at longer, maybe up to 2 years of study time. I put in well over a year of study for this, but I was lucky enough to pass on my first attempt, both the tasting and the written, so pretty happy about that. Other tips and resources: brew unfamiliar styles. We're home brewers. If you're unfamiliar with a style, I think there's almost no better way to get intimate with that style besides brewing it. And if you brew it well and it turns out to style, then you have 5 gallons or more of that style to get very well acquainted with it. And also, if you go to the BJCP website, you can print out their score sheets that they use for judging. And these are really nice if you're tasting some beers, go ahead and fill out those sheets. And then kind of go back, look at the style guidelines, see how close you got. For me, this was a really good way to just drive in the details of a style. And it forces you to really be thinking about the beer while you're drinking it. And focus on your weaker areas. For home brewers, especially if you've been homebrewing for quite a while, your knowledge of ingredients and process is probably, it might be pretty good already. However, there might be some gaps in style knowledge and keeping and serving topics. So, focus your energy on what you know the least, of course. And Cicerone has a YouTube channel where they have a tasting together series where a master Cicerone comes on and talks about various beer styles. I found this really useful as well. And at this point, I feel like they have most of the major styles up there. I mean, they have quite a few, probably a couple gaps, but the big ones are covered, so that's really useful. All right, so that's it. I definitely had a lot of fun working on this, and I'm proud to have passed this. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll try to get around to answering those the best I can. Cheers.